Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. Today's episode, in the snow, uphill, both ways, with our special guest, Marisa Jones, Policy and Partnership Director from National Safe Routes to School Partnership.
The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
All right. So today's agenda, well, let's do our roll call first. Commissioner Smith, you in the house?
I'm here.
Commissioner Kostelik. Oh, Kostelik is gone. He is on assignment doing God's work, doing an ADA transition plan in Washington State. So he's doing things that need to be done. So in his stead, the one, the only, the mustached miracle worker, Commissioner Mark Fenton. Commissioner Fenton, first of all, how are you?
I am present and honored to be here, standing in Dan's spot. You can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
We're so glad to have you, Mark.
Yeah, we are.
Commissioner. It brings me back to my days serving on my planning board, by the way.
I know. That's why we got you. So, all right. And then I'm here. We're all accounted for. Our agenda today is going to be our discussion item, our whiskey pairing interview, and then our lightning round. Can I get a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Sweet. It is unanimous. All right. So before we get to our discussion item, just as a reminder to our audience, if you could go to our website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com, hit up our YouTube site. All of our most every one of our videos is there. Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Deezer. We need your help. We need you to subscribe, like, and give us some feedback. In fact, just a week and a half ago, we recorded an episode completely based on some of our listeners' thoughts and opinions. And so it was a lot of fun, and that will be coming your way soon. So we'd love your input and participation. Thanks for all that you're doing on your end. So now, my first item of our day, discussion item, fellow commissioners, what's the most memorable thing that ever happened for you on a walk or bike ride to school? You got to dust off the memory bank, especially for one of us. He's got a little bit of a deeper bank than us.
Yeah, I'm going back a lot farther. You guys are going to have to give me It's not like I'm just thinking back 10 or 15 years. It's more like 40 or 50.
It could be college. College is school too, right?
That's true.
Oh, I was going to say, I was homeschooled. So I'm like,
I know.
Well, just right down the hallway. There you go.
Maybe the time that you almost lit your house on fire, that was a memorable day.
That was pretty good. I think that was a Saturday, to be fair. I did those kind of shenanigans on a Saturday. But I did live on campus in my undergrad for a little bit. I think I made it a semester before I was out of there. But so the way that they had set up, this is when they started having dorms, and this was a brand new dorm, and they started having dorms where it was kind of a little apartment, and you had a little kitchen, and I did almost burn the house down in that kitchen. I baked cookies and left them overnight. So if anybody's wondering about that stoneware, they will not catch on fire. They will turn into little lumps of coal if you leave them on all night in the oven.
And from that day forward, the policies in the dorms were changed and the ovens were removed.
No more ovens. They were all removed because nothing.
Way to go.
Hey, it was great.
Way to go.
But anyway, so we just it was we had a little trolley thing that went around campus because University of North Carolina at Charlotte is a big university. I think it's 1,000 square acres. It's got a ton of land there. It's the largest geographically campus of the 16 North Carolina university campuses. And so we actually had a little bus system, and it looked like a little tram. It was very cute, like a little trolley. And I just remember I could never figure out how to get to the right place to get on the trolley. And like by the time I got to the place on the trolley where you could pick it up, it was go in a different direction. So I'll tell you the most memorable walk though was, so there were, they had the old engineering buildings here. And then they call it a country mile, right? A little bit over a mile away was where they built the new engineering buildings. And
Was it 10 times larger and had way more capacity than it needed to?
Hey, that's traffic. That's traffic. These were the like
Oh,
mechanical.
sorry.
This is back when I was a mechanical engineering major. Okay, like some of us started out right, and then
Hey, Ra, that's the one, man. That's me.
So, well, I strayed so far from mechanical engineering at this point. But anyway, so you had 10 minutes in between these classes. These are 50-minute classes, and you had 10 minutes in between. And let me tell you, if you told me I had to walk a mile, a country mile in 10 minutes with a backpack on, now I'd be like, no, we're just not taking that class. So we would do that. We would hoof it. And I don't know what would happen, but we were always late. And they were like, why are you late? We're like, because, yeah, we were like, the reason we're late is because there was no planning involved with where these classrooms were built away from each other. And they still have classes in both of those buildings. You have to go back and forth.
That's a lot of hoofing. Well, I'll take over. I'll give Mark a little extra time to dig into the recesses of his memory bank there. I consider myself to be pretty fortunate in this way because I started off, riding my bike on a crazy busy arterial in California that now I look back on going, what the heck were my parents thinking in a way? Because it was a very busy roadway. Here I was riding on my little bike on the sidewalk, second grade, and then walking to school for many years, and then taking the bus along the freeway and going to the high school and all that stuff. So I kind of got a chance to, I think, experience all the different routes in addition to the being driven part. But are you ready? My most memorable? Oh, here it is. Chris's first kiss. Oh, there it was.
On the walk to school.
On the walk home from
on the walk home. Yep, sure. The meander. It wasn't a walk. That was a meander. That was a saunter. That was a
float the rest of the way.
Lover's Lane.
Yeah, right. Set the stage for you. I'm getting there. I think I was in the sixth grade. I think I was sixth grade.
Early
and she had to go down one street and I had to continue on mine. And it was one of those where we paused and everybody around us knew what was going to happen. So they're all just staring and gawking. And it was the most awkwardly horrible thing in the world. But there it took place. And, that was, I think, a good Friday afternoon. And, there it was. So that was probably my most memorable walk to school. That's good thing, I think. Yeah.
It's probably
not the best kiss, but I was in the sixth grade. What are you going to do?
Wow. Were there braces involved?
Not yet. That came later. I was such an ugly duckling in high school, man. But there you go. Mark, when the sixth grade, had his mustache was already well on its way.
Sure. Yeah, it's fully grown. Yeah, I was already. So boy, that brings back, actually that's peripherally related to mine because I walked to school from about third grade on with buddies from my neighborhood, Brockport, New York, small town, upstate New York, outside of Rochester. Maybe a mile and a half at that time to the school. It was a reasonable walk, but there was a fairly direct route on roads. There was also a shortcut, what we called the shortcut, that you dodged through a couple of yards, through the back of people's yards, and had to jump across a creek, Coleman Creek, which we loved, right? And
I like that you said creek and not crick where I live.
It's a creek.
It's a creek. It's a creek. 2 E's.
Double E. That's right. And here's the deal. Different times of the year, sometimes it's a tiny little, stream that you could literally step across. But during the spring, now this is upstate New York, right? Between Rochester and Buffalo, snow belt. You can imagine when there's big snow belt, that thing would be 5-6 feet wide. And when you're like a fifth grader, that's a big jump. Water roaring. And by the way, we specifically chose the spot in the backyard of Sherry Miller's house because she was really cute, and I would have been perfectly happy if that had been my first kiss, but no. I wanted.
She wasn't impressed by your leaping abilities.
I wanted to prove that I could make the 5-foot jump. Came home with a big soaker that night. Went right in.
Oh man,
one of those nights that sticks in my mind.
So you were trying to show off? Is that what was happening?
Yes, of course.
Oh man,
it was. Hold my beer. Watch this, boys.
Maybe well, you showed her wearing those short shorts in the '84 Olympic trials. I mean, she's like, "Oh, how did I miss out on that?" Right?
Passed on that guy. Look at that mustache. How did I not grab onto that manhood?
Yeah. Well, Sherry, right? If you're listening out there, you know,
Right.
you missed your chance on the Fenton boat, man. There he is. So, all
I'm
right.
telling you,
Well,
man, it was a longer route to school. We loved playing in that creek, though. When we were little kids, we were in and out of that thing. Kids
Yeah.
like to walk to school, which is why it's so cool. We have Marisa today because they
Yeah.
love doing this.
100%. All right, so let's get to our whiskey pairing, and then let's get to Marisa. She's got a lot of good, way more informative things to say than us knuckleheads, right?
Yeah.
So our whiskey pairing, I had to think about this, and I had another one in mind, but I'm gonna go with, and this is actually, believe it or not, one of my favorites. Anvil. Oh, a bad background. There you go.
Say,
oh, you can't see it anyway. Angel's Envy finished rye. Why? For lots of reasons. First of all, anybody who's working with kids and trying to get them safely to and from school is clearly an angel in my book, right? Secondly, it's got a perfect age statement. It's age 6 to 7 years. Yes, right in the wheelhouse of kids. And then in terms of some of the notes, oh my gosh, some of the nose in the palate, it's gingerbread, maple sugar candy, molasses, right? I mean, come on now, kids, don't drink this. Don't I'm not condoning it for anybody under, appropriate age, but I do think it's appropriate. Finished in rye, or finished in rum barrels that actually started off as cognac barrels. So this takes a lot of effort to make and to get going, and I think that's kind of appropriate for what we're talking today, because safe routes isn't exactly easy. There's a lot of things that are trying to get in the way, and it takes time to mature. And there it is. So there's our whiskey pairing. So hopefully that one works for everybody at home. Now, let's move on to our special guest. Our special guest today, as mentioned a second ago, is Marisa Jones, who's the Policy and Partnership Director from the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. Marisa, thanks for joining the Planning Commission podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
On such short notice, so we appreciate that. So let's start off with a little bit about you, your personal background. It might be a little unconventional. I know you're not necessarily coming from the planning background, but clearly you're in a place where they do a lot of planning-based work. So tell us a little bit about that and your general career path that has led you to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am not a planner. I'm a policy person. But really how I got into this space is that I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, like in front of a dairy farm and down the street from a cornfield and up the street from a peach orchard. And I always wanted to walk places, and we couldn't walk anywhere. Luckily, I'm one of 4 kids, and we were all really close together in age and would play in the backyard and run around outside. But my journey to school was taking 2 school buses. I think we hear about that all the time in big cities. I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids are getting bused and it's so far. But growing up in rural Pennsylvania, I also took 2 buses to get to school. And so that was something that was always on my mind, was like, I felt so stuck in rural PA and wanted to live somewhere that I could not have to be driven by my parents, or once I learned how to drive, not have to drive myself 30 minutes to get to high school. And so I studied public health and political science and knew that I wanted to work at this intersection of policy and planning. I didn't quite have the chops to be an engineer or a planner, because I don't think I knew about planning until I was like out of grad school.
This just in, planners have chops. I didn't know that.
I was going to say, listen, we're just better at pretending.
And yeah, in terms of what took me to Safe Routes Partnership, I worked on a bunch of random things like right out of college, but I was working on a municipal level public policy campaign in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and working on complete streets and the early days of Vision Zero, and worked really closely in partnership with Safe Routes Partnership. And I always loved that they knew like how to get the money. They Safe Routes Partnership always they were on top of like, here's how you get the money, here's how you apply, here's how you make this happen. And that was so appealing to me. And so then when an opportunity came up to apply my skills to do safe routes to school and advocate for money and policies that support kids to walk and bike, I was hearkened back to my childhood desire to walk and bike and apply my professional skills in that arena.
That's so cool. It's such a fun, it's always a fun story, I think, when we get to do something that we sort of dreamed about when we were little and then find a place where we can put that into the world. So I really love that. And seeing your just enthusiasm and hearing you chat about how much this means to you. One of the things I was looking at on the Safe Routes website is the What We Believe. And this is just so beautiful. We at National Center for Safe Routes to School believe in the importance and joy of safe walking, biking, and rolling. And it's just all over your face, just and in your voice when you're talking about this. And that's just kind of incredible. So, why I want to know a little bit of history. Why was Safe Routes created, and how does that partnership work?
Yeah, so Safe Routes to School, has been around forever in terms of like the lowercase safe routes to school. Like, how have people have gotten to school in a variety of ways longer than safe routes to school, the proper noun, has been a thing. But in terms of like the proper noun, safe routes to school, the capitalized movement, it's been around in the US since like the 90s. It really got started in the Bronx and in the state of Florida as like a city-based and a state-based program. And then there were pilot programs funded by NHTSA in the early 2000s. And then our organization worked really closely with members of Congress to create a federal Safe Routes to School program in 2005 that had funding, about $1 billion in funding from 2005 to 2012, and full-time Safe Routes to School coordinators in all 50 states, plus DC. And so our organization, the Safe Routes Partnership, has always served as like the policy home for Safe Routes to School. One of our main roles is making sure that Safe Routes to School is prioritized and funded in federal law, helping Safe Routes to School programs all across the country understand how to access those funds, working with departments of transportation to maximize opportunities to support Safe Routes to School, walking and biking, and really serving as like the home for Safe Routes to School. And we hadn't really been focused on like the non-infrastructure education encouragement work until the federal funding, the dedicated federal funding went away. Right. And then we started to do some of that programmatic support. But it is really great to be this like home hub community for Safe Routes programs. As you mentioned, like there is so much joy and fun in supporting community connectedness and these great activities like walking school buses and golden sneaker contests. And I think by nature, Safe Routes to School attracts a certain kind of like parents and advocates and community members and professionals. And so we serve as like, again, that home hub of like connecting people to each other, sharing that creativity and innovation across the country.
So this is great, Marisa, because I was lucky enough to be one of those kids that did live in town, close enough to school. In fact, I've often told people I was a free range kid because I'm old enough too to remember that when a kid could be released on Saturday morning and just go play with their friends and not show up till lunch or dinner, and walk to school every day, no adult supervision. That was the little lowercase Safe Routes to School. We had Safe Routes to School 40 and 50 years ago in a lot of neighborhoods and communities. And you make a really important point that it's this modern realization now that, well, for some reason we have to have a program and policies and financial support and funding to restore capital S Safe Routes to School, right? Make it a thing. I'm sure the average person is listening saying, wait, sort of what role can I play here beyond possibly walking my child to school? But how can I, because there are a lot of people, let's just be really frank and put it out there, who would say, could not let my kid walk to school right now. Even if I'm close enough, they've got to cross a really busy arterial road, or a couple of them, or there are no sidewalks along the route, because I live in one of those subdivisions built in the 60s or 70s, or when we didn't put a single sidewalk in a single subdivision in America. Or I live in a community where we had neighborhood schools, but we've changed, when those went down, we consolidated our schools into a big, beautiful school campus on the edge of town with all these ball fields around it, but many, many miles from most neighborhoods, right? I mean, those are just examples of the kind of challenges that have changed, things that have changed over the last 40 or 50 years. So the average person says, so I live in this community where there are no sidewalks and there are big arterial roads, and my kid goes to a consolidated school that's 4 miles from our house. How could I get involved? What should I know about this safe routes movement? Is there something there for me here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think you speaking to your personal experience also speaks to this global experience of, like, even if you don't know safe routes to school by name, everyone has this personal experience of how they got to school. And it could be the way that you were talking about it, that is this really, like, joyful memory of, like, oh my gosh, I loved being able to walk to school and jumping over the creek. And mine is more like, I didn't have, my school was a 30-minute drive away, so I couldn't walk there. And so whether or not your personal experience enabled you to walk or bike or wheel or skate or scoot to school, it can be different for future and current generations. And so I think for the average person, what they can and should know about safe routes to school is that no matter where you live, whether it's a rural area, a suburban area, an urban area, there are opportunities to build an active commute into your school day. And we know that there are so many reasons that people want to walk and bike. And I think that's one of the nice things about safe routes to school is, like, it is a thing. It is like a program, but it also is so variable and so, like, context sensitive, like so many things in active transportation. And so you can want to walk your kid to school or walk to school because you care about getting in, like, that physical activity before your work day, or, oh wow, you're really focused on, like, the research shows there are all these academic benefits for my kid to, like, arrive at school ready to learn. Or maybe you really care about the environment. You're like, you know what? Every trip that I don't take in my car, I am, like, not polluting the environment. Or maybe there are concerns about traffic safety that, like, hey, it's actually safer for us to walk through this park than even get in the car. Or maybe it's like, oh my God, that car drop-off line is going to add 20 minutes to my morning commute. Like, I cannot deal with that.
Yep.
And so I think that's one of the nice things about safe routes to school is that there are so many reasons to do it, and you don't have to pick just one. And whether it's like where I live in the city of Philadelphia, like the elementary school that my daughter is going to go to next year, 3 blocks away, like sidewalks, crosswalks, a crossing guard, like, oh my God, the complete opposite of where I grew up. But even in a remote area or a rural area, like, you could drop your kid off at a park and walk that last little bit to avoid the car drop-off line. That's what one of my colleagues does. She's like, I can't deal with that drop-off line. Like, we make our own little remote drop-off of, like, drop off before the.
Aren't schools even doing that as a matter of policy? Starting to set up little satellite drop-off locations, or for that matter, satellite sort of bus pickup locations so people can walk to those? Because you said even in rural communities, you're seeing people start to apply these principles, right?
Yes, definitely. And that has been around for a while. So there is some creativity around making sure that people can build that into their day.
So, Marisa, this is something a lot of people don't necessarily know about me. Is my very first project as a consultant was a Safe Routes to School project. It was, I got very fortunate. Ironically enough, it was with our state DOT. They wanted to do a pilot project in a bedroom community here in Boise, and they sent me out to Denver to go through the Safe Routes to School training course on how to be an instructor in the whole 9 yards. And that's how, for me, my career kind of jumped off, and at least working for myself. And so this program has always been near and dear to my heart. So I'd be curious to know, Where have you seen some of the successes of this program being implemented? And then one of the things we really try on this podcast to shed light on is maybe how has some things fallen short and how do we get over that hump? So if we can hit on the success and then maybe some of the challenges, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, and again, I'm sorry, like I'm a policy person. I'm very steeped in the let's follow safe routes to school through 4 federal transportation bills. But I talked about how there was dedicated safe routes to school funding in all 50 states. And one of the things that was super great about that, in addition to really socializing the idea and getting departments of transportation acquainted with how to implement this program, is that it also provided a great platform for evaluation and research. Does this program work? Does it actually make it safer for kids to walk and bike? If we build it, will they walk and bike? And one of the really things that we're super proud of and that we feel really good about when we're promoting safe routes to school is that there has been rigorous external evaluation that shows that safe routes to school works to reduce childhood injury and fatality. It works to reduce traffic violence involving kids. I was just emailing with somebody today citing a study from New York City that showed that in places where safe routes to school interventions were applied, there was a 44% decrease in childhood injuries and fatalities associated with traffic, compared to no change in places that didn't have that. So it's really good to see that. And then there's also been a ton of evaluation that shows that the program is cost effective within 5 years. It has a societal benefit outweighing the cost within 2 years. And in terms of kind of this question of where has it worked, I think so often people think about oh yeah, in cities where you have a grid and you have crosswalks, you have sidewalks, that's the easy place to think about safe routes to school. But we recently, in 2019, did a safe routes to school census of local programs to really try and understand where are safe routes to school programs happening, among a number of other things. And one of the things that we're both surprised and pleased to see is that safe routes to school programs exist in rural, urban, and suburban areas proportionate to the population of our country living in those areas. So it's about 22% of Americans that live in rural areas, and about 22% of safe routes to school programs are in rural areas. So we have I sort of love looking at, there are all these from several years ago, amazing stories from Montana and Wyoming and Idaho, these places where it's you feel you're in the middle of nowhere. And then it's oh, here's a walking school bus because a sidewalk was installed when there was safe routes to school funding. And maybe that's also just me harkening back again to my rural upbringing of jumping in an irrigation ditch, while on my runs, the tractors rolling by. And so I think we feel super good about the research that shows that this has worked, the stories, the photos, the anecdotes we hear. But we're also as at Safe Routes Partnership, we are very committed to being a learning organization. In no way are we we did it, we did the thing. We're always trying to figure out what can we do better? How do we continue to iterate and get creative? And I think one of the things that Mark touched on earlier is one area that we have fallen short as a movement, which is not staying ahead of the relationship between active transportation and safe routes to school and land use planning. And so school siting has always been on our radar, but it's not somewhere that we have been super effective yet at moving the needle. And so Mark talked about this for those who aren't familiar with school siting, but thinking at what policies either a state or a school district or a locality has in place that deem where schools can go. And as Mark was talking about, there has been this push, especially in suburban areas, to have these gorgeous landscapes, ball fields, these what we often see as minimum acreage requirements for schools that end up putting them way too far away to actually be walkable. And so how can we be promoting walking and bicycling if they are physically too far away to walk to. Like, it is not realistic to ask an elementary school student to walk 5 miles to school.
No, you can't ask a college kid to walk a country mile, it turns out. Listen,
Exactly.
you were teeing up exactly what I'm thinking about right now. So one of the things I am thinking about, and this is I'm hoping this is gonna help your policy heart shine, by the way. I'm also a policy gal. That's where I've spent most of my planning work. So I kind of work in the design space on the side, but what I'm thinking about is there's been so much conversation in the planning world and the policy world about equity in transportation. And what I really love about what the Safe Routes Partnership is doing is also talking about mobility justice. And I would love for you to just tell me about mobility justice. What is it? What can we do? And I know that there's some actions that you can take. And I love policy and programs where we can take actions and it makes a difference. So I'm thinking about mobility justice and how's that different than equity? How does that fit in with the equity conversation? What do you think? Is your policy brain going a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you're hitting on something that's like Safe Routes to School and the work that we do at the partnership really is this nexus of like planning and policy and community. And I think our organization has done a good job of this over the years. And I think that we have really tried to push the Safe Routes to School movement in this direction of recognizing that the decisions that we've made historically about where to invest in places to walk and bike safely. And, you know, they're not just historical policy and funding decisions. I should make sure that I'm clear they're also contemporary. These are also the things that we're saying. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of those are human-made decisions that impact the outcomes,
You got this.
that impact people's ability to get around. And so we want to do everything in our power to change policy, change funding, change community norms to make sure that we are both rectifying historical and current contemporary injustices about where we're investing and who we're saying it's important to make it safe for them to walk and bike, and that we're changing the way that we do that moving forward. And so that's one of the things, like, in our 6 E's framework of Safe Routes to School, equity has been part of that for about the last 10 years, and really trying to make that real for people, really trying to make sure that doesn't feel just like this add-on, like, oh, what does it mean to lead with equity? Like, oh, that means that we're making sure that kids with disabilities are included in Safe Routes to School programming, and that is built in from the beginning. That's not an afterthought. And that shows up in our policy work. One of the things we're super happy about this year is a new requirement for state departments of transportation to define and prioritize high-need communities when selecting funding awards for the biggest federal pot of money for walking and biking. And so it's really about, like, reimagining our transportation system to work for everyone, whatever their age, ability, disability, wherever they live. And it's not like in spite of these different, it's like, no, we want to create a transportation ecosystem that helps people get where they need and want to go in a way that feels good and safe and supportive for them.
And boy, isn't that a big deal? I mean, to me, this is a big change as a guy who's been in the field long enough. If we start to actually decide where to allocate funds, not just based on the number of pedestrians we see there right now, which may not even be a good indicator of whether it's right. It may be that they're walking in the best places already, but rather where there are these other needs, such as chronic disease risk, race, income, car ownership, rate of car ownership. I mean, there are lots of things that can help us find communities that have been historically neglected, right? So you guys are at the front of this. I think the partnership's done a really good job of raising this conversation. We're going to have to do more. The other interesting point you made a moment ago, you said, look, there's a growing body of evidence that says this stuff is working. And one of the themes that I hear, and Corey, this is my engineer's ear, right? Because I did end up studying mechanical engineering. So I think systems, right? That, you know, that mechies, right? We're systems guys. And yes, we have the programs, walking school buses. We had one in my neighborhood. My wife and I did one, and encouragement programs and golden shoes. We gave the gold, we spray painted a sneaker gold and gave it out every year at our school. Love all that stuff. It's when we got crosswalks painted and some sidewalks repaired, and, you know, sort of the foundational infrastructure's got to be there. It's sort of at the base of the pyramid. You can't build a pyramid of change without the physical infrastructure there. And we know planners play a pretty critical role in that process, don't they? And I'd like you to think out loud about how you're seeing planners be sort of leading change agents for this work in their communities. Because, you know, I think that profession is often at a perfect nexus point between public health, social equity, transportation engineering, right? You know, all of those, even decisions like you just alluded to, school siting or subdivision development, right?
Yeah,
All of that stuff.
Mark, I'm going to follow up and just kind of push into this a little bit more. It's that design of our community. We've forgotten to think about a community as a place that needs all these bits and pieces. We'll design a house to the nth degree, right? With the pullouts. Oh, my favorite, the pullout spice drawer. Yeah. But our school site selection, we're the things in our criteria are stuff like the cost of the property. And like, I understand we have to think about how much it's going to cost us.
What about the cost of the transportation over the next 3 decades, though, or 5 decades?
What about the cost? What about the cost of the health impacts of those children that they're in an adult level like commute for 2 hours a day when they should be running around and you know, working on their fine mobility skills or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know anything about childhood development, but let's just put that out there. But, you know, I get so frustrated when we keep talking about it's a money problem. It's a money problem. I don't think it's really a money problem. I don't think it's a money problem. You know, we're just talking about here about how the Safe Routes Partnership, like what attracted you to that organization was they knew how to get things funded. They knew how to do things. So I don't think it's a money thing. I think we have to shift our idea of how we design our communities. And if we have to redesign them because these are still contemporary problems that we have, let's do that. How do we do that? And I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. And I think, Mark, to your point too, like the infrastructure and non-infrastructure go hand in hand. And like the original federal program built that in. It said, you know, you have to spend a certain amount on building the supportive street features that are going to make this possible. And you need to spend a certain amount on teaching kids, teaching parents, teaching schools how to walk and bike safely. Like these are learned skills. Like I have a 5-year-old, my older child is 5. I was literally teaching her how to look left, right, left the other day. Like we all learned that at some point. Somebody has to teach that the same way that we learn how to ride a bike. We also have to learn like, okay, when the cars are pointing this way, that means they're going to come from that direction. Like as adults, we just take that for granted. But so I think this idea that we need both the supportive infrastructure and we need like the knowledge and encouragement is what really enables this shift in this mode shift and cultural shift. And I think planners can play such a critical role in that. I mean, as I said, like I'm not a planner, so take this all with a grain of salt, but like, I think that planners have the opportunity to do some of that translation work between like, okay, we know that like traffic needs to flow and we know that we need to follow certain rules and the NUTCD, but how can we use things like Safe Routes to School to champion the change that we want to see? And I think I talk about this a lot with cities. Like the only constant in change making is that people are reluctant to it. Like people do not like change. Even if in the end it's going to be good, people don't want a speed hump outside in their neighborhood. God forbid they have to slow down. And so thinking about how focusing on the safety of young people and kids, and like, it's just so hard to argue with the idea of keeping kids safe on the walk to school. And so thinking about like, okay, well, how can Safe Routes to School help advance our community change goals, our traffic calming goals? Like, okay, maybe we introduce speed humps to our community by putting them outside of school, and we share like, hey, did you know that drivers hit 5 kids every day in this city? Like, this is why we're slowing down traffic, because kids should not we should not be imperiling kids on their walk to school.
So I'm going to jump in here a little bit, and I think we've touched on a few things, but I'm going to guess that, especially as a policymaker and by working those channels high up, maybe federal level and all those types of things, but I'm just curious, who or what is getting in the way? And we've talked about, we're going to have a future episode on big box schools with an expert out of I think he's out of Washington State here soon, and I can't wait for that. And it's, for me, that's my number one planning issue without a doubt, especially in states like mine. So we know that one, but are there other things and or folks that sort of tend to get in the way of implementing a successful safe routes to school program, or even not even having to think about it from a safe routes to school program itself, but just simply walking and biking to school, right? Not a formal program. What's preventing some of that from happening?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things, but I think one of the biggest problems is that planners as a profession, as well as like ordinary people, like we have defaulted to car as norm thinking. That is the status quo. And for people to think outside of this car-centric life feels really revolutionary or complicated or foreign. And I think that there are ways that everyday people, there are ways that we need to shift, and then there are ways that planners need to shift too. And I absolutely recognize that there is change afoot. I think a lot of planners have really been breaking out of that car-centered thinking, but there are a lot of like deeply entrenched views, and whether that is working in a city government that says like, hey, your budget, the streets department budget is tied to like how efficiently are you moving cars? It doesn't matter then that an individual planner or engineer really, they bike to work and they care about this. If their success is being measured by car as norm, it's really hard to make change. And so we really want to change the system within which people are operating, as well as changing some of that mentality. And I think too, like, props again to all of you who are planners. I think y'all are so used to like that long-term change. You're like, yes, I am working on that 40-year plan. Like the rest of us, like, I'm just trying to walk my kid to kindergarten next year. Like, it's not, for the average parent, like it's not within our thinking that like, I need a crosswalk to get across this street and I need to wait 6 years. Like we need to do a traffic study. We need to apply for funding. The state needs to obligate that funding. Like, and so I think this mismatch between like the planning profession and like the lingo and the like long-term view and the average person's desire for like, okay, but like, how do I get my kid to school this week?
Right. Yeah. Jess has a question for you, and then I know Mark, and then we'll get into our lightning round, but a quick follow-up. And that's something you're hitting it right on the head. It's so crazy to me. There's times you go into a community and everybody will look at a piece of sidewalk at intersection and go, yeah, we need something right there. Well, okay, yeah, we all agree, but all right, we have to get it programmed, we have to get it this, and have to, like, come on, man, let's go. Why are we taking so long to get something done right now? And on another point, I think I'm hopeful that we're going to have a future episode on 15-minute cities. And if you did not see the footage making its way around Twitter from the planner in Edmonton, you're shaking your head. Maybe you saw that poor guy. I think his name is it Richard Strong? I think is his name. And he's tasked with 15-minute cities and this whole concept of simply trying to put things in close enough proximity that we can access them how we want. It's no simpler. And it's ironically enough for me, as someone formerly of the U.S. military, I'm like, this is exactly what's done on every military base across the country.
Yep.
And college campuses as well. Right? You're like, housing, yes. Job, yes. Education, yes. Recreation, yes. Food, yes. Retail, yes. All of it's in walkable distance. That's all this is about.
Oh, and by the way, we did it for hundreds of years before the automobile.
Yeah.
Every town was built that way. Every city was built that way.
That video, if you've not seen it,
years, if not millennia.
Oh,
if you've not
fantastic.
seen that video, it's glorious. I would encourage you to find it, because somebody asked him about, why didn't you put that in the plan or something? And his response was, well, I didn't think I had to put in that we're not going to neuter your chinchilla either, but for the win, right there, man.
It was an angry mob. It was really, really rough.
So Jess, go ahead, and then we'll get close to wrapping up.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing? Can I say
Yeah.
Say three
quickly?
things.
I want to go back to what you just said about like, oh, we all know this piece of sidewalk we need to change it, but it has to go through all of these steps. Like we create so many more obstacles for walking and bicycling. And I think this goes back to the car-centered thinking. Like if we built roads for cars the same way that we build bike infrastructure and sidewalks, like, oh, we're putting in 3 blocks at a time opportunistically. And like, how many times have any of us been like, I'm pushing my stroller on the sidewalk and the sidewalk ends, or like suddenly the bike lane spits me out into like 5 lanes of traffic. Like we don't do that for cars. So why do we do that for people walking and bicycling and using wheelchairs? So just again, going back to this like notion of car-centered thinking, and like we really need to break out of that. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Jess.
No, I love it. And this next question, it just kind of seems a little silly because you are so optimistic. I want to know, what are you the most optimistic about for the future of school-aged kids and the objective of the Safe Routes Partnership?
So I would not be our lobbyist and our federal policy person if I didn't talk about the infrastructure law that passed in 2021, new funding, new opportunities, but that's boring for most people. So
no, let's talk about it. Yeah, I think, you know what? And I know you've got something you're really optimistic about, but real quick, and some of our listeners are new planners. What was the big infrastructure bill that you're talking about? We know because we've been running around in it, but what happened? Why was that important?
Yeah, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 passed in November 2021, and it's a generational investment in our surface transportation infrastructure. It is the first transportation funding bill that includes a climate title that really recognizes the nexus between our transportation system, carbon emissions. For the programs that we care a lot about related to walking and biking, we saw over a 60% increase in the investment in walking, bicycling, and safe routes to school. Walking, biking, and safe routes to school are eligible across a whole new bunch of programs. There's a new vulnerable road user special rule requiring states that have high rates of injuries and of fatalities of people walking and biking to spend their safety money keeping those road users safe. There are also a whole bunch of new discretionary programs. So those are competitive grants through USDOT. So it's just really exciting. There's a ton of innovation.
That was the most beautiful summary of the infra. That was so good. Perfect. Okay. So you are optimistic. You're optimistic.
Yes.
And I love all this
funding. From a non-policy and funding side, what I'm optimistic about is that this generation of parents, I don't want to talk about bad about my generation of parents, my parents' generation, but as a parent, I feel like this generation of parents cares a ton about the climate. We also have, we care about climate, we care about health, we care about being physically active, and we also have a lot more flexibility for working from home. So that, I know my parents, they had a long commute to work, driving us to school was way faster than other options, or just sticking us on the bus. But for me to not have to put on heels and a suit and get ready for work makes it a lot easier for me to walk my kids to school and then, come on Zoom meetings where I, don't have to be I'm not wearing heels, I'm wearing sneakers. I think that there's such a culture of convenience for older generations that okay, we're dropping them off in the car. That's the most convenient. And I think there's just been this cultural shift for parents of school-aged kids now that can, the confluence of that and all this new money and attention for walking and bicycling is a really exciting opportunity.
Perfect. So I can tell you are definitely East Coast, the reference to sneaker. that seems to be much more of an East Coast word than West Coast.
What
You don't agree?
What do you call them? No,
So-
what do you call them?
Yeah, what
So
do you call 'em?
us dorks out in the West Coast tend to go with tennis shoes, I think, is more of the common
Oh.
vernacular. It's like Coke, Pepsi, soda, pop, right?
Right.
So on
I'm
that
wearing
note,
platform sneakers. If I played tennis in these, I would break my ankles.
so on that note, we're gonna transition into the lightning round for the last few minutes here. So I want you to tell me, what is then your favorite walking sneaker?
Oh gosh, I am so not a sneakerhead. Maybe this is from like 7 years of working remotely. And too many years of Catholic school. I have no fashion sense. My favorite walking sneaker is whatever is in my closet. I don't know. It's like
Not
my running
Reebok,
shoes.
since one of us represented Reebok for years and years.
Oh,
But
Reebok. I'm a New Balance girl
I'm
myself.
sorry.
there you go.
You know,
New Balance
it's
is
fun,
good.
a pair of New Balance. I like that. I can
They're
dress them
cute.
up or dress them down.
That's right.
Yeah.
I got some black ones. They have like a little cheetah print something on. It's cute.
Ooh.
Gotta
Um,
get you some sustainable Allbirds wool shoes. You know, the
I
ones
have
that
some
are
of those
sustainable.
too.
Yeah,
Oh my
they're
gosh.
the best, man.
I just try whatever Facebook tells me to. Don't tell Facebook. Okay, they already know. It's fine. So I want to know, what have you been what's your nerdy like policy travel habit? When you go travel other places, is there something like about your work that pops out and your family and friends are like, "Can you stop? We're trying to have a good time."
That's like everything about me. There was this predates working at the partnership, but before I worked at the partnership, I was working on how local governments procure goods with their money and like have this idea of like public funds for public good, and was doing a lot of like healthy vending machine contracts. So I think like still on my phone, I have like an album of like 60 like city halls and like what's in their vending machines. Like
It's a pack of
Yeah.
carrots. Take a picture quick.
I want that as a coffee table book. I want all of that in a coffee table book. That would be so amazing.
actually one that's current and topical for this, and it's relevant because in our February e-news, Safe Routes Partnership e-news, this was on full display, is I will regularly stage my family in photos of like nice infrastructure. So like the header of our e-news from February is my partner and one of our daughters in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in a crosswalk in the snow, like using a little pedestrian crossing flag. So I definitely like make everybody I know like pose for photos in front
Better-
of nice or
better-
terrible infrastructure.
Better Philadelphia
Yeah.
song.
That's a-
Motown Philly by Boyz II Men, or Streets of Philadelphia by Bruce Springsteen.
Oh,
Oh, I gotta go with Bruce on this one.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a good class. That's a tearjerker, right? Like that one gets at your heartstrings.
mhm.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, how about a favorite recreational activity with those kids? How old are they now, and favorite thing you like to do with them?
I have a 5-year-old, I have a 21-month-old, and I will have a third one exactly 1 month from today.
Oh, congrats!
Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Favorite recreational activity, we got a cargo e-bike this year, and that has been like such a game changer. So much fun, absolutely love that. And other than that, like skiing and cross country skiing.
Nice.
So we haven't done any of that this year because there's no snow on the East Coast.
Do you drink whiskey?
Not at this moment.
Not right
No.
now, but yes, I do. When not
Not
pregnant.
now. I mean, when
Somebody gave me
appropriate.
non-alcoholic whiskey, and I wasn't sure like the whiskey pairing part of this podcast, if I was gonna have to like bust that out.
It's a growing trend. Yeah, I've seen it more and more. I'm not sure if it'll take off or not. We'll see. But in any case, all right. Well, I think at this point, we're going to have to call this episode a wrap. We appreciate your time. Marisa Jones, Policy and Partnership Director from the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. We appreciate so much your time and your efforts. Thank you for being on the Planning Commission podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun. Thanks.
All right. So for our audience, check out the website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. Hit us up, Amazon, YouTube, Apple, Carrier Pigeon, and all the other ways. Give us a like, a subscription. We would appreciate that. Commissioners, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And seconded.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. Bye. Hey, everybody. Commissioner Danley here. Would you like to see more? Hear more? Well, we got you covered. Go to our website, www.theplanningcommissionpodcast.com. It's got everything you want. Guests, yep, past episodes, the video, the audio, even our whiskey pairing, links to everything about all the people we've had on, books, websites, you name it. It's unbelievable. You want to reach out to us? Please. We'd be more than happy to chat. You can email us, planningcommissionpodcast@gmail.com. You want to tweet at us? Go for it, @planningcommish. We're also on YouTube with the Planning Commission Podcast channel, Facebook. Heck, send us a carrier pigeon if you need to. We'd love to hear from you about ideas, guests, you name it. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll keep doing our thing. You keep doing yours. Have a good one.